explanation, just, for anyone that's tuning in for the first time, is it's hard to get a sports code training. It's, it helps to hear from somebody that's been a part of it. It's different with different sports, big soccer, lacrosse is getting into it, a lot of hockey. So it's important to have it directly attributed to your sport. And then the biggest thing, and I talk about this all the time, is that people aren't really taught how to use it properly. And that's kind of what I'm here for. Ask questions, do all the things. So coding your games, the importance of toggles, hotkeys, and the matrix. So essentially what I want to do here is go through how we code our own games at St. Louis, what that means, and what it pertains to as far as how we set everything up, how I can code it in such a way that it allows a manager to do it, and then I go in and add in, and then I'll talk about the differences between pro and elite and what this looks like, for all different levels. So the first thing I'll talk about is toggles. It is elite only, but the thing about toggles is you can actually use code buttons kind of as toggles. It's a strange workaround, but the first good code window I ever made was used, because it was a pro code window, was using code buttons as toggles. And it helped me a lot in terms of getting it done quickly and being able to save space, because one of the things about code windows, and especially when sports code was really prominent, when it was back in Australia, it was sports tech, people were unaware of how to really make their code windows efficient. And so there's this old documentary of the Detroit Pistons video coordinator from back in maybe 2006 or 7. And he had this code window that the code window took up the entire screen, and he had to use the smallest version of the video in order to fit all his code buttons, because the NBA is doing some crazy stuff as far as what they need at halftime. And what toggles allow you to do is to see a bigger picture of the screen, have more buttons on there, and then it allows you to ultimately get more information in a smaller amount of time. And that's the key to that. And then they're really important for output windows. I can talk a little bit about output windows and why I use toggles. People that are at a high level and use output windows definitely do different, or have different methods for it. But I have mine, and nothing's better or worse. Hotkeys is another big deal. If you use sports code, you probably use hotkeys to some degree. I'll go in a little bit in detail as far as what those kind of the keys of the hotkeys, and then why you don't want to have too many, and then the matrix. So for those that don't understand the uses of the matrix, it's a pro and elite thing. You can do it and manipulate it in a lot of ways, and it's really the best way to go in and find things quickly. When you import from Synergy, or when you are coding games or practices yourself, the matrix is going to function the same way. And all in all, I think it works really well. So I'm going to go in and give a couple examples here. Let's get rid of that guy. So with this, I'll start with the toggles example. So you guys are pro, so it's going to look a little bit different. But the idea here is these are toggle buttons, okay? So when you go in and, say you were to use an elite license, you create whatever kind of button it is, you double click on it, and then you have this label this option that's action. And that's an elite only thing. And that's how you can make it a movie or make it a toggle for anyone that's looking, that has an elite license. Going in here, now, as you'll see, this is how toggles kind of function. And then I'll get into the script and get into how to do this. And like I said, for anyone that's on pro or anyone that wants to use this as a code button, I'll get a little bit more in depth with my next demo. But this is exactly what a code button would do, the exact same thing that this toggle is right now. The only difference is a toggle is not going to put codes on the timeline. It's just used to manipulate other buttons. So you go to report mode or into code mode, depending on whether you're using an output report or or you're coding a game. But when you're in code mode, you click on for the first button, and it changes this button, and just for sake of the argument, it makes it blue. If you click off of it and click the other one, this one makes it purple. Okay, so When you have both of them clicked down, it's just going to do whichever one is later in the script, which I'll explain that in a second. But going in here so you can see the types of the buttons. So this is just a label. It's really simple. No hotkeys, no ID, nothing like that. All it is going to have this script in here. And one of the things that I've wanted to discuss is having commands at the top of a button. So like I said, pro, elite, it doesn't matter. When you say the button color up here, this is what orange is going to be. So you use this RGB system. It's something that if coloring is important to you, I'd love to talk about that, but it's not something that you get these example scripts that give you basic colors. If it's important for you to have your school specific colors or whatever it is, you can use that system, but I don't think it's necessary in terms of using basic colors, but you always can. So essentially when you put a command at the top of a button, it's going to default to that. So whatever color I change this to, say I make this green, okay, but then I execute the command, it's going to change back to orange. That's just the default for that button. And the same thing goes for how I name it. So let's say I name it green, change the color to green, and then I execute it, it changes back to orange. So you'll see kind of, and I'll show you guys my code window as far as why this is important and why it all kind of ties together. But essentially, that's the important piece of having those commands at the top. Now, using these buttons and using code buttons, it's going to function the same way. Right here, I've just created two variables dealing with button states. Now, what a button state is, let's explain this really quickly. So if a button is active, like has these little rings in it, then its button state equals 1. If it is not active, the button state equals 0. And so when you're scripting that, you go in here and you say, this is what the button state is equal to. So I have IDs on both of these buttons. This one here is button 1 to avoid confusion. This right here is button 2. In order to identify those, all you use is this exact script right here. When you're using states, this is going to be really the only efficient way to use this script is going to be the only efficient way. A lot of other ways of scripting can allow you to change it up and do different ways. But in terms of states, this is what you're going to want to do. So I've established those variables using that $sign. And now what I'm saying is right down here, if variable 1 equals 1, so essentially if this button is clicked down, then change the button color to blue and rename it blue. So those are what those two commands are saying. It's the same for button 2. So if variable 2 equals 1, then rename it purple. If variable 2 equals 1, change the button color to purple. It's really simple. The one thing I want to add is you can combine these statements to change it completely. So if you wanted to go in here, and I'll use this script as an example, if variable 1 equals 1 and variable 2 equals 1, then you can create another command. So I don't know, throw out a color because I can't think of one.
Green.
Green. Okay. I don't know why I literally just drew a brain fart. I needed your help. But so you go in here and you can go into these example scripts right here, and you have all these options. And this is a great way to get started with scripting for anyone. It gives you a description of what this looks like, and then it can also obviously do some scripting for you. And instead of going into the RGB system, which I get so frustrated with, all you can do is say set button color to green, and then it gives you that little script right there for you. So now I put that in it, throw it in the parentheses. I do the same thing right here, and then I rename it. So I'll go here, rename green, and then provided that I didn't miss any parentheses or anything, you go in here, change both of these, and now it's going to be green. As you can see, if it's just one of them or the other, it's going to be those purple and orange, but now it's going to be green. That's the best way to get into toggles. Like I said, if I were to change these to code buttons, it functions the exact same way. Do you guys have any questions on that before I move on? It's something that's really good to toy with and play around with. I think, honestly, toggles are kind of fun, and using it to see how you can manipulate it is something that's really can help you be more efficient. Now going into the hotkeys a little bit, I use this. So now this is something that you can do in pro. I use these code buttons, and this is exactly what I do when we're coding scout games. So essentially, this is, offense, defense. We're coding the game. It's the same IDs as before. So you have button 1 and button 2. And then you go in and you have your hotkey here. So the hotkey is Z. Now, you could make this Shift Z, you could make this Q, whatever, whatever hotkey you so desire. And when you go in here, the great thing about hotkeys and using toggles or using code buttons is keeping everything in line. Now, the reason I use zone is because when we're coding a scout game or coding one of our games, we want to know both when a team is on offense and they're in a zone, they're on defense and they're in a zone, right? So what's important is to understand, okay, we want to be able to use the same hotkey, because when I think zone, I think Z. There's no other button on the keyboard that I can think quickly enough, and I've tried it, to do this different ways, and it's just tough. So when you're going in here, and I'll show you how this functions, is you click offense and it changes to zone offense. You click defense and it changes to zone defense, but the hotkey remains the same. So now as you're coding, this is what this is going to look like no matter what side of the ball we're on. And that was what I wanted to get into and kind of marry these two ideas together, is why it's important to have both. Now, the best thing to know in terms of hotkeys, and I talked about the dangers of too many hotkeys, and this is a big, I've run into some NBA teams that do this, a lot of big-time college programs that, they have high-level video guys coding the games live because they have that personnel. And so they want to have everything dedicated to a hotkey, which is fine if you can get really good at it and have every hotkey memorized, or maybe you have a code or a key just kind of explaining all those things to you. But in my opinion, it's a lot easier to go in and have separate hotkeys based on, whether you're in a zone, whether you're in a certain series, because then that not only can that code window be smaller, but you're dealing with less hotkeys, and you can see the hotkey on the button. So if I change this setting to show the hotkey, you can change, red and orange it doesn't look perfect, but you can change this hotkey and then you can see it. So your key is right there for you, and you can see those things quickly. And as you get in the habit of it, it makes it a lot easier. Like I said, if somebody's been doing this for a long time, it's really tough to get them to change their ways with it. But it's going to help you, and it's going to make things quicker and faster. From a guy that spent a lot of time coding games and a lot of time doing it by myself and trying to get it done as quickly as possible, it's really tough. And this is one of those ways that it can make it simpler for you. And toying around with this is a great way to do it. And now the last thing I want to get into is the matrix a little bit. All I really want to show in this example is what how you can manipulate the matrix, and then I'll go in as I give a little bit more examples in my halftime review section. But in reality, all I want to show you guys is this. So this is what a full coded game looks like for us. I'll show you the code window how we do this. So Mason, there's your boy Tay Weaver. Looks like he took a charge but missed 2 threes in this game. So Southern Illinois, it's okay, we won. But he essentially, what I do is every player has a group, and this allows me to count the total of 3-pointers made, defensive rebounds, shot locations, whatever it is, but also have it attributed to an individual player. And I think that's important because, coach is going to ask for things. I remember specifically in this game, Demarius had 4 assists, and coach said, can I see those? I want to see, because he's had trouble passing the ball, like the last 2 games or whatever it is. I want to see how he improved. And so I pull up those clips really quickly, and now he knows right away. And an example there, another great is using your boy, Tay Weaver. Coach wants charges every single game, especially if we win. He wants to end on charges, say, hey, this is how we got here. And so now I know, okay, Tay took one charge. I think Yuri also took one in this game, if I'm remembering right. No, that's all right. I tried. But I also have output windows that link to these games that have those numbers that, spit out automatically. But here's what's great about these matrices and this code window. So these are all the player stats, everything they do, every guy. And then I also have what the opponent did. And that's important. So if coach wants to see all of their 3-point field goals and, then what defense we were in, I can go in and manipulate the code window the same way. But to use the example, so Jordan Goodwin, plays a lot for us. And coach wants to go in and see all the times that he was in and we ran a certain set. So I can go in, I can add a label or group. So if I wanted to go in and say play call, and then I took all the set names out because I don't want coach to murder me. But if I wanted to see set 10 and I see, okay, there was one possession that he was on the floor and that we ran that play. So I want to see how it was efficient when we ran it. If I wanted to ignore the group, so let's say if I wanted to see all of the defensive rebounds that were while Jordan was on the floor, because Jordan was I think he was the only guard in the country to average a double-double. So I go in, add defensive rebounds. There were 23 defensive rebounds on the defensive side of the ball when Jordan was in the game. That's pretty spectacular. But that's only when he was on the floor. I want to see exactly what those numbers were when, he was with how many rebounds of those were Hassan French's when Jordan was on the floor, just to manipulate that. So I can go in with the label and the group, say Hassan French, defensive rebound. You say, okay, well, 5 of those were Haas's. So now you look at the total of the rebounding. You're like, well, as we can imagine, those rebounds are attributed to those 2 guys, and they're the best duo on the floor rebounding. It just allows me to have proof when I'm going in and showing coach, hey, these are, what's working. That's how you manipulate the matrix. You can, swap the axes, sort it based on labels. So if you wanted to change it to the group or, the blank labels, anything like that, it's really easy to go in and find whatever you want in the matrix very quickly. If you didn't know, you can click on the video and pull everything up that you need to. So I'm hoping that I'm not a fool. And this is a shot by Javante where he made it 2. Yes. All right. So I didn't screw up this game, or our manager didn't screw up this game. And now coach can go in and find that video really quickly, which helps when, you have 15 minutes to prepare a film session. You've really got everything you need to at least do what you can to find that stuff. And that's really what I wanted to talk about with the matrix. Do you guys have any questions before I keep going with the rest of this deal? All right. So the biggest thing right now is I want to give you guys a demo about a demo of how our code window works. I get a lot of questions about this because one of the toughest parts about hold on, let's move this deal to the side. One of the toughest parts about coding a game is you want to have your managers do as much as possible. And, at smaller programs, sometimes that's tough. When I was at Boise State, I was the one coding the games. So this stuff didn't really matter because I was doing everything by myself. But as you get to different programs and different situations, you want guys to be able to be as independent as they can. And frankly, you want to make it advantageous. You want the guys to want to code games. And I think that's a cool way to kind of get into kind of motivate these guys. I'm very fortunate. I don't think they're on here right now, but I had 2 really great managers last year. One, just he's a stat head and he loves analytics, and he really took a liking to coding our games. And then our another one of our guys was really great about coding scout games. And just the reality is sometimes you're not always that fortunate, and you want to motivate these guys and get them to code as much of a game as possible. And one of the ways that I do that is I try to make it as easy and as visually and aesthetically as appealing as possible. So, for example, I'll open this up. So when the manager will never see the code window outside of about this angle. This is all he's ever going to see. Now, there's a lot that I have done that's hidden. If I open it up here, oops, let's get rid of that. See, I have the opponent name here, and then I have all of the blank buttons that I'll get into here in a second, explain what the function of those are. But the first thing I'll talk about is this rename button. So I think the game that I pulled up was VCU. So let's open that guy up. Oh, that's Southern Illinois. Let's get this. Always be prepared. So VCU, this is a game of VCU. So I go in here before I ever, because by the time the game has started, this is ready to go. And the manager comes up, I set my thing up, I head down to the bench, and he's ready to go. He knows what to do. So I renamed this to VCU, and then it changes, the logo changes, and it changes the names of the buttons, and I'll get into that. But the first thing is, a lot of people say, the pictures, the aesthetic appeal, that's useless. That's a waste of time. The first thing I'll say is, the first reason it's not a waste of time is because our managers like it, and they get in and they're like, this is cool. I can pick our opponent. I can see the scoreboard, and that's all fine and dandy. But the reality, in my opinion, is it helps it be more accurate. So, we'll have either the TV version or the other version that we record ourselves with the scoreboard. Every time the manager looks up on the video, he can see that his score is accurate. It's easy to see because he's got the logo right in front of him for both teams. And he also knows if he's ever made a mistake. And it's really quick to go back and find those mistakes. It's really important for Coach Ford and for everyone here to see everything accurately. And I think that's one of the great ways to ensure that. And for me, to put these pictures in here, it really doesn't take that long. And I think it really helps our guys a lot. So that's my 2 cents on the issue. And all else aside, I think it looks kind of cool. I've taken pride in some of my code windows over the years, and it's a good way to do it. So talking about the scripts. So the first thing I'll talk about is, how do you get all these pictures in here? So let's kind of copy this so I'm not destroying anything. So if you're to go in here, oh, look at that. I got stuff over there. So if you're to go in here and change these buttons and change the opacity, you can see that I actually have every A10 team's logo overlaid. And the way that this button works is, whenever I rename it, it just pushes that button to the forefront. And the buttons that are around it are the ones that keep score and the ones that code the defense. So essentially, the picture button isn't functioning at all. I just put a button behind there to highlight which team has the possession. With us, you can see it's a little different because it actually highlights the Billiken head, but that's obviously a very minor detail. The script itself is, I'll just show you guys. So you click on these buttons. So let's make them all visible again. So the first one here is Richmond. So right here, it's really simple. This button name is opponent. Right here, you can see the ID. All it is if the button name is Richmond, then the button opacity is 100. And you just say button opacity. That's how the script works. But the button opacity is 100. Button opacity is 0. Now this one, St. Joseph's, same idea. UMass, St. Joseph. So it's really easy. All you do is select all of these, and you go to align. You can align it left, align it top. And now that's a little messy because they're all visible right now, but that's essentially what it's going to look like. Really easy way to do that. Like I said, a lot of people think it's unnecessary, but I really love it. Now the next thing, so I think that was the last thing I wanted to talk about before I go in. Yeah, okay. So now I just want to code a few possessions for you guys, kind of show you what this looks like, how it helps our guys, how it helps our managers, and then how we get, we are able to crank out all of this information with a very limited amount of space used in the code window. So we'll go, whoops, look at that, I'm already screwing up. So I'll make this small. And this is in Huddle Sportscode for anybody that's wondering. It functions the same way in Sportscode version 11. So make this a little bigger. Move this to the side. There we go. All right. So go here. VCU St. Louis. Pick this game for a particular reason. Get into the start here. So the first thing we'll do here. Mardi Gras madness in St. Louis for anyone who's ever heard. I didn't know until I moved out here, but it's a big celebration. So when you go in here, the first thing that I have our managers do is he clicks on the faces of the guys that are in the game. So our starters for this game, I believe, were our normal starters. So it's Jordan, Hassan, Jimmy, Yuri, and Demarius, if I believe that's right. So he clicks on those faces, and now this is going to automatically register who's in the game. So you start with an offensive possession, faulty tip. We go in here. So Yuri pulls up. Yuri misses a 2. So the way this works, and I have hotkeys for these guys, but I won't get into that too much because I'm sure you guys understand the concept of hotkeys. So Yuri is in here. He pulls up from right inside the paint, and he misses a 2. So I go in here. I click on Yuri's name, I click on -2, and then I click on the shot location in the paint. So as you'll see, when I click on Yuri's name, it changes down here at the bottom. You'll see it changes the group to Yuri. And I'll explain the script on that in a second. But so now I know, in addition to all of our shot charts, I know which ones are coming from Yuri, and I know which ones are coming from the opponent, whoever it is. So we lose the possession. Okay, we didn't get an offensive rebound. So the opponent got a defensive rebound, and then we switch to VCU. We have the possession. So the opponent turns the ball over. Jordan Goodwin, I'd say that's Jordan's steal. Give that to him. And obviously there's no shot location. So the possession switches, and now we're rolling. I'm just waiting for a possession where we score. So we get fouled. That's same idea. So now what I do here is I say opponent, foul, Hassan French is going to be the group now. So we'll continue the clip open. Pause, misses a free throw. So click on that. We don't need the location for that. Although I did have a manager do that a lot. He misses the second free throw. So I go there again. And then we don't get the defensive rebound. So we go opponent, defensive rebound, possession switches. I'm just waiting for somebody to score. So, okay, so the opponent scores. So opponent plus 3-point field goal from the right wing. All right. And so now once you clip out of that clip, the score registers there. So now our manager knows if we're being accurate. The best example is, when these guys are coding the game, it's just you want to make it as simple an interface as possible for them to make sure that everything's accurate. As you can see, just to code those few possessions, I mean, we're basically still in real time. He's caught up almost the entire game, and that's the goal for me. The first thing I'll say is, if somebody checks in, if Tay checks in, you click off Yuri's face, click on Tay's face. Everything else stays the same. Another big thing is we actually, because we calculate points per possession, I use what's called the dead ball button. Some people call it out. Some people call it, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But essentially, it's the hotkey 3. And so we didn't have an opportunity. But if the ball goes out of bounds and the possession doesn't change, he knows to hit 3. So that when my script goes back, I don't count that as a possession. So when I'm calculating points per possession, he just understands that. The dead ball button happens to be the A10 logo. That's just, what I did to make it look good. But essentially that's how it all works. Do you have any questions on the basic function of the code window?
So when you had this all set up, did you just copy and paste like the images of the guys so that each box was like the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in here, every guy the button has a name and then it has an ID, and I'll explain that in a second. And these are all toggles, but you could make them code buttons in your case. And then when you go in here, I just screen capped all the guys' images and put it in the background of the button. So like if I wanted to, you could pick any image from your computer, and I've known guys that would rather use certain images rather than guys' heads, and that's all right, to each his own. I think it's another thing that really ensures accuracy, because for whatever reason, just visually it's easier to see the guy's face, and I think it makes it better. And it really doesn't take that long to go in and make that better. But yeah, is that kind of what you're asking? Yeah, so that's a great way to start and to do that. And then if you'll go in here, you'll notice the matrix. Oops, let's sting this. So open up the matrix, and you can see these are the guys' minutes. It says lineup, and it's whoever's in the game, and how many possessions. The opponent with their made three-pointer, where the three-pointer was. Jordan got a steal. Yuri missed these shots. So it's keeping up as the game goes on. The next thing I'll like to say is, as I love our managers, but we run so many different sets at SLU. It's really tough to go in and teach them all the different sets. So if you wanted to do a halftime film review session or anything that changes the lineups or the sets or make any corrections, there's a couple different ways to do that. The first one is I don't want to open up our sets and show everyone, but you can go into label mode where you drag the playhead, you tab through the instances, and if you have all your labels over here, you can do it that way. You obviously, as a pro license, you do not have label mode, so the best way to do it is to go right click on the clip, edit the labels, and add those in here. So if you have more questions on that, I can definitely bring up what a labels tree is and how to use that. I had a lot of experience with that using a pro license. But the way I do it, and the way I think you can actually do this now in Huddle Sportscode with an organizer and a sorter, so you can do it in pro and elite. But I go in here, I have the clips sorted that I want to, and I can add an instance note or a flag or whatever it is. Normally I would change the group to play call. I don't want to do that right now because it's going to screw everything up, but it doesn't really matter. So you add columns, change it to play call, type in, play one, and then it's going to synchronize back to the timeline. And if I wanted to go see that set that says play one under play call, it's right there. Does that make sense? So that's as far as getting play calls. So that's what I do after the game is I go into the sorter. I add all of our play calls. I try to add all of our defenses in, and then all that data spits out, and I print everything out for coach, and I'm good to go after the game. There's people have different methods of doing that. Like I said, if I was one that was coding the games myself, I would probably try to keep a labels window, at least of our common sets. Like I'd have it, maybe over here somewhere where if I get caught up, I can go in and label the sets as we're going. But the reality is, we in college, I don't know, I'm actually not 100% sure what the rule is on this anymore. I've heard a lot of things, but for a while you weren't allowed to do halftime review in college. So it wasn't a big deal for me to like rush up and, get an edit done for coach before halftime. But I do know that that rule has changed to some degree. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure on how it is, but a lot of teams will do halftime review and go in here and, want to have these sessions done almost immediately. And so as I'm going in here, I want to talk about, before I get into the scripting and everything on the code window, I want to talk about a couple different things as far as what you can do for halftime review. The first one is exporting clips. So let's just say coach, they made a 3 on this play and coach wants that clip and he just wants it on his phone or whatever it is so he can watch it. You can text it to him from up top. You can, airdrop it to an iPad so the guys can see it. So you can airdrop it to airplay it to a TV, whatever it is. This is a great way to do that. So you can export the file, export the video, just say, single video file, clip for coach, exports. And now, obviously, that functions a lot of ways. You can put the clips on YouTube. You can put it into iMovie, make highlights. It just allows you to deal with that video outside of Sportscode. Any questions on that? So you go in here, and now that I think that went to my documents for whatever reason, I hate that. But then you go in, drag it, airdrop it. So right here, if I open up my phone, open up my phone right next to me. Oh, it's locked. Well, I don't know why it's locked. So now I can drop it to myself. Takes maybe 10 seconds tops. I mean, that was really fast. Must have been a short clip. But now, as you guys can see, I have the clip on my phone. I can text it to coach as soon as he needs it. And like I said, that doesn't just function for halftime review. There's been a lot of stuff, especially in quarantine, where I've had to export and text a coach or upload it to YouTube and send him a link that way. I just think that's a really important function to understand in Sportscode. Let's see, what else do we have here? Editing clips. So the first thing is, if you want to create an edit quickly, you're going to need to know how to edit clips. One of the great things about Huddle Sportscode is how much easier it is to edit a clip. So when you click on a clip, it has play and it has edit, and all you need to do is drag this in, drag it in here, whatever it is, however you want to clip it, and exit out. And then now that clip is trimmed to whatever you wanted. Export, put it in an edit, send it to an organizer, anything like that is ready to go. And the only thing is, let me open up. So I got in the habit of editing clips in V11. And the hotkey for that is, so you hit Control E to edit a clip in V11, or you can go to, I think it's File or Edit, Instance Edit right there. But essentially, what I want to do, so coach doesn't need to see us bringing up the ball, I can edit it here. I can go Control I, and that takes that clip. And then if I want to trim it down just to see that shot, sorry, I had to give your boy that miss. That's funny that's how that worked. But Control Out. Now clip is done. So now coach is seeing exactly what he wants to see. It's easy and really concise. I actually prefer doing it that way, just because like I said, I got in such a habit of it. But I do think that the way that it is in Huddle Sportscode is a lot better. Okay, good. Got the editing clips down. Creating an edit quickly. So this is, in a pinch, whether it's halftime, whether it's before a film session the next day, using flagging is really important. So if you're here, so if you open up, the offensive clips, whatever it is, and you go to your preferences, you can create various flags. As you can see, I didn't realize I had this many flags. So you can create a series of flags that allow you to use a hotkey whenever you're viewing clips. And if you want to be able to create notes, send it to an organizer or send it to a sorter, then it allows you to quickly do so. So I'm just going to use T as this example right now for transition. And so if I hit T, it allows me to type in a note right there. Spelled transition wrong. Again, I spelled it wrong twice. So anyway, but you go in, type transition, it sends it to an editor, it sends it to a sorter, sends it to an organizer, and now you're going to have all those clips that you flagged right there ready available. That's the quickest way to make an edit in my experience. The other function for that is some coaches love flagging because when the clips are already created, now they can just save their clips, type it in why they wanted that clip. I can go in, edit it down, and then their edits are ready. So flagging is a great function for not only you creating edits, but for assistant and head coaches. Coach Ford actually likes to use flagging a little bit too with his Huddle remote. All right. Labeling sets, I touched on that. So the last two things I want to touch on are how to do this thing live. Like I said, the first thing about halftime review is I don't know I got to ask our compliance on precisely what the rule is now as far as halftime review. But I do know that in the NBA or professional teams, or if you're, if you're a coach in Canada or Australia, you don't have these restrictions. And so there's a process called timeline share, or the process called mirror codes, which allows you to live code a package in another computer through an IP address. I could do a whole session on those, so you don't need to like worry yourselves about it. We don't use it. It's a very high tech thing, but if you're an NBA coach, or if you're a professional coach and you want to be able to quickly have edits at halftime, or if you want something immediately after a game, if your coach is the type to sit the team down and watch it immediately afterwards, it's a really great process. It's become a lot easier in Huddle Sportscode, and I just wanted to touch on that because we were talking about halftime review, and if there's anybody that has more questions about how to do that, my number at the end of the presentation, text me, email me, call me, I'm all ears. The last thing, and then in light of halftime review, and this is I know this is illegal in college basketball. I think the women are just now implementing this part of it, but it's having technology on the bench. So, if you're watching the Spurs, for example, LaMarcus Aldridge loves to have his iPad and watch his minutes when he's off on the bench, and they do that using a process called Huddle Replay. It's definitely high end. I mean, if you're like Mason, you guys are on pro licenses, you're definitely not going to go invest in Huddle Replay. I know for sure we're not going to go do it just because, I mean, it's just not in the budget. But it's a huge NBA thing. It's a huge professional thing. And it allows you to have video on an iPad on the bench, which is pretty cool. But like I said, it requires usually more than one video guy. And it does require somebody on the bench with access to an iPad in order not only to sort it, but also to give them the iPad, which is a violation in college basketball. So, hopefully I'm not going to get a call from some compliance officer talking about it, because I know the rule. I know that we're not allowed to do it. But that's something I just wanted to touch on. Any questions on those couple things? All right. So now I want to get you guys, the last thing I'll talk about really here is how I made this code window. I spent a lot of time making a lot of different code windows. I've done a lot of trial and error. And if this is something that you're interested in, a code window that looks like this, I'm going to go into, I think my next session is going to be on scouting and what we do for scouting, and how I go in and do all of it from that aspect. But in terms of coding your own games, I really think this is the best process, because it allows you to have all this information. It's really simple. I mean, I feel like anybody in this room, I could sit you down with this code window, explain to you in 5 minutes, and you probably could figure it out. And it gives you a ton of information as well. And that's what's key for us. So in essence of, or in light of getting into the nitty gritty of it, let's start from the top. So this first button right here is the scoreboard button. So this has a basic script here where the button name team 1 is just going to be us, which is this little guy, or where is it? Where is it? Yeah, there it is right there. So this is button name team 1. And then you're just doing the row, basically where row equals offense. And then it does a little formula, and then it calculates a score for you. I do this to ensure accuracy. This defense button functions the same way, except it just analyzes team 2. This is, like I said, this is the dead ball button. The hotkey is 3. That just allows me to calculate points per possession in all of our sets. This is the live action button. So like you saw in our TV copy, it was just raw footage. But with that SIU game, the one where we overlay the scoreboard on top, it's important to have the dead time cut out. So I have our managers use this button to take out all the dead time. There's no script or anything. It's just the Billikens word mark, or whatever you call that. But that's really simple. The offensive button. So for this one, you have the image in it. So let's see. So right here, I have the image in the offensive button because I know it's not changing. Hotkey is 1. ID is team 1. This one, as I mentioned a little bit previously, this is going to be the scoreboard button, and this is going to be the, let's see if I can find it. So this one is going to be the defensive button. And then I know it doesn't look like it, but all the images are actually behind this button. And that's why you can see, you know, which team is being overlaid when it's their possession. Any questions on that? Just the basic kind of structure of the score and the code window. All right. Now this is where it gets a little bit trickier, is dealing with these code buttons. So the first thing you're going to want to do is if you want to, like I said, pro, you can do this with code buttons, but we use toggles just keep everything cleaner. You go in, make a toggle action toggle button. The button name is really not important, to be honest with you. I just did that when I was originally creating it to make sure I knew which guy was which as I was putting the pictures in. But what's really important is this button ID. So every guy on here has his initials, just because we didn't have anybody that was the same. If you do have guys that are the same, it's not a big deal, but you know, you can definitely figure it out. Now, why that's important is when you're here and you're on trying to figure out this script, you need it to identify each individual guy and why, you know, while he's in the game. So this one is just dealing with player minutes. So now I'll show you guys the secret to, I actually don't know if I've ever shown anybody how this works. So the secret here, let's drag these over, this is really far away, is I'll explain why this works. So toggles don't do anything. Toggles are no labels. So when you click on a toggle, nothing shows up in your code window. So what you might ask is, when you click on those buttons, what's changing? And to show you, when you're coding a game, you click on the guy's name and his name shows up over here in these labels. Okay? So now the guys that are in the game, it shows up. The only issue with this is you could technically have 6 or 7 guys in the game. And so that's why it's important that our managers only click on 5 guys. But of all the issues I've had, that's not been one of them. Now, what this does is these buttons, if I can show the links, if that looks a little way too crazy. Sorry if that just kind of got overwhelming. But essentially, the offensive defense buttons activate all of these buttons. Now, these are just blank buttons because they're guys that aren't in the game, even though it's activating those buttons because it's been renamed to nothing, it's activating nothing. So if I go back, hide these again, and show you the script on what this looks like, all it is really basic. It's the state of button JG, Jordan Goodwin, and if the button is active, like I said before, rename it Jordan Goodwin. If it's not, rename it nothing, so a space. And it functions that way for every single guy on the team. That's actually, believe it or not, that's one of the easiest parts about the script. Do you guys have any questions on that, on the player minutes deal? All right. So now, in light of using the groups and the shot charts and the locations, this is where it, again, gets probably as tricky as it does. So with these, I have IDs here. You can see I have the hotkey for Jordan, but with these, you have player 1 as the button ID. Now these are also toggle buttons. As you can see, when you click them down, it just changes the guy. But the difference is these all have exclusive links, so you can only click on one guy at a time, which is good because all you want to do is say, okay, Jimmy Bell hit a shot from around or at the rim, and it was a 2-pointer. And that's why all these groups that you look down at the bottom are renamed to that player. What this now does is these labels. So the only labels in this code window are the results of the play and the shot locations, and then these player minutes over here. So everything else is a code button or a toggle. And what's important to notice is that's how this all works. And this is how I'm able to differentiate between this is what this player is doing and this is what we're doing as a team. This is what we're doing as a team on offense. This is what we're doing when this lineup is in the game. And that's what is important about the information, because coach isn't always, he doesn't need a detailed lineup efficiency after every game. He doesn't need, these crazy analytics reports after every game, but this provides you enough information that if coach were to say, hey, can I get a lineup analysis from last game? It's a lot easier than going in and recoding the game, getting all the guys' minutes, or it's even as simple as, hey, can I watch TJ's minutes? Can I watch, so on and so forth. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I saw your chat, Mike, but I'll talk to you. I'll give you a call right after this. But what was I saying? Oh, with all these deals and with all of these different buttons and different ideas, then you're able to go in and just show a guy, show these guys player minutes. And the best part about all of this and all of what I code is our players get to see this. We have a Huddle subscription, and so I don't upload a game to Huddle until we have completely finished coding. And that includes scout games, that includes scouting edits, that includes our games. And what that means is, and we have some guys that are really good with Huddle. I'll give him a quick shout out. He'll probably never see this, but number 15, Demarius Jacobs, my man, watches more film than anybody on the planet. And he's always asking me, he's learning about Huddle. And so these guys can go in and do the same thing that our coaches are and click on all the times we ran this set. They can click on if they just want to see their minutes, they can go see their minutes. Tay was really funny. Tay wanted to go see his shots for certain games. So he'd click on and he'd go see, where he's getting his shots from, why they're working, why they're not working. You smile because I'm sure that's not anything different from when he was at EKU. So that's what I really love about this and I love about the marriage between Sportscode and Huddle is it's so hard to get guys to just sit down and watch an entire game. It's hard to get them to, come into the office so you can load it on their iPad or whatever it is. With Huddle, I mean, they'll watch it on their phones when they're walking to class. I mean, some guys have told me they watch it during class, which I probably shouldn't tell that, but and our guys have really loved this idea and they love watching film. And that's what makes me happy is because we're going to be able to get these guys better as quickly as possible. And they can go in and see exactly what they want. If they're having trouble learning a play, if they're having trouble understanding why they're allowing threes, all that stuff's available for them. And then it just saves them time. So hopefully they can go get, better grades or get in the gym and get more shots up. Anyway, off my little tangent there, the biggest deal here now is going to be the script on these buttons. So the script on every single one of these labels is identical. It is going to look extremely daunting at first, but here's the reality is once you see this script and, you guys, you'll be able to watch this on YouTube. You can copy this script exactly. It really isn't that bad. Essentially, it's functioning just like the other toggle buttons where it goes in with all the player states. It goes in with all of the players' names. And then again, this here is going to be the names of the players, the group, and then the names of the players, and then how it's renaming it. So I'll go in step by step because I know this is a lot when you're looking at it, all these dollar signs and number signs and whatever. So the first one is this is going to say, this is the player's state that I've talked about before. So these are all the toggle buttons. So this is player, and this is button player 1 state. So that's Jordan's player state. So when this button is active, that's what it's saying. It's saying this button is active or not. And then the same thing here. So this is the name of that button. So the name is Jordan Goodwin. And what that's saying is it is going to identify the name of that button as Jordan Goodwin. Now what this number sign is essentially functions the same way as the button name, right? So this allows you now to go in and say, okay, this is the name Jordan Goodwin. And the reason I do it that way instead of just typing out number 0 Jordan Goodwin is I can put any player's name in that button. For example, we had guys graduate this year. I'm gonna have to change this up. All I have to do is change the number of that name of that button instead of going in and retyping this entire script. And then now what's this saying is if the player 1 is equal to, if player is equal to 1, then rename the group this variable up here. So it's renaming it Jordan Goodwin. The idea here is, first of all, this was just to be clear, these two things function the exact same way. Like they're literally identical. I just ended up leaving it because I wanted to have the script in there. But I could say player name and variable 1 are equal to each other, just so you guys are aware of that. I had forgotten that I had done that. But that's how the whole script of the whole thing works. And now everything is rounded out and you can gather all that information properly. Does that make sense? Kind of. I know it's a lot to take in, but that's the idea. Any questions? All right. Let's see here. Mirror codes. Make sure I check my notes and see that that's everything I wanted to talk to you guys. That's really it. So, I mean, I really appreciate you guys being on. That's my information for anyone. I feel like everybody in the world has it now, but if you don't, feel free to copy it down, shoot me an email, call me anytime. I'm usually pretty good about answering. Do you guys have any final questions before I let you get back to your quarantine lives? Giancarlo, do you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you, though. I appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, man. Anytime. It's what I'm here for. Be up on YouTube per usual. As always, contact me, call me, whatever it is. Watch a video on YouTube, and I'm here for any questions. I really appreciate you guys coming out, and have a great rest of your week. Hope this was a good start to it.
Appreciate it, David.
Anytime, guys.
Thanks. See ya.